Hi there, everybody. This is Chris Schmidt from Rocket Lasso, and this is the first official episode of Off the Record. Off the Record is a Patreon-supported section of the content I'm trying to create. And the idea here is that anybody supporting me on Patreon at least the technician tier is going to get access to these extra live streams behind the scenes. Any cool final animations or tutorials or anything, we're going to end up making that kind of public for everybody. But if you want every moment of behind the scenes as things are being created, then you want to head on over to Patreon, which I've got actually right here. If you want to jump on over, you can see that we got different tiers. Jump in, support if you can, but all the awesome final content that should be useful to everybody will eventually be made free for everyone. Anyway, this is just if you want to support the live streams and the tutorials and the things that I do. But in this episode, we are making this, which would normally be completely private, we're making this one public because I want to promote the chain projects on the Rocket Lasso Slack community. So the idea here is that there are projects happen, chain projects, where people will do an animation and pass off to the next person and continue it, and I want to make this more visible. So in this episode, we are modeling, and this is actually requested by the community, they want to do something Rocket Lasso themed, so we are converting the 2D vector logo into a 3D model, and that 3D model is going to be available for everybody to work from in these projects. So right here, I've actually got kind of a 3D printed version example of the model here. I was given these out at NAB. It's a fun little 3D version. So essentially, we go and make that from scratch, and that file will be available. So there's no reason to spend any more time here. Go ahead and head over to rocketlassoslack.com if you want to join on the Slack, especially if you want to join on to this chain project, which they are run mostly by Paul. It's going to be a really fun one, and let's get right into the video. And here I've got my folder where I've got different versions of the logo, and here we've got the a version where I've already saved it out in Illustrator 8, which is kind of the old school way of doing it, where you'd have to go into Illustrator and export as Illustrator 8 before it would open. Now there's also ArtSmart. I think I might actually have ArtSmart now. Yeah, so there's ArtSmart where we could import a more modern copy of Illustrator directly, but this I already had it, so there we go. It's simple. The way I exported this is actually coming in as a single spline, and honestly, we are only worried about one thing, and that is the rocket directly. So I'm actually going to select everything else, UW, delete, and I guess we need to grab all the letters, UW, delete, and miss those, UW, delete. Cool. So this little rocket here is the only thing we are concerned with. I'm going to select all. I'm going to hit Shift-C, PSR, reset that to 0. Hit the letter S to zoom in on it. Also, this is not centered on its own axis, so I'm going to zero that out. Now we hit S again, so that should be centered there. I believe this is at perfect 45-degree angle, so if we go and we type in, I needed negative 45, so I did 45, now I'm going to do negative 90, so we're going to be pointing straight up. And now I'm going to also create a cube and see how tiny our rocket is. And it's pretty small, so I'm going to hit T for scale and scale this up until it's about the size of a cube, because that's just kind of the size that cinema likes working in general. So yeah, something right around there. So it's just a reasonable size. So there we go. We've got our rocket extracted and ready to mess with. So, well, everybody who sounded off is an R20. Now, everybody else might not be an R20, but they're just embarrassed to sound off, so you never know. Let's go ahead and give this a quick save. I'm going to jump this into, in fact, we can go into logo, and I can go into launch and chain projects, and here's where we will save it. So, let's just call this number, I'm going to call it live 1. I'm going to call it 1 live, actually. 1_live. Rocket. Okay, cool. So that's going to be number 1. That's our spline. So let's go ahead and call that rocket. And now, a couple different things. First of all, this is our overall logo, just kind of exported. And we could potentially, this would be interesting. It's not going to look right, but we could go and create a lathe and throw that in and spin it around. But you can see how funky that's going to look, because obviously that's not the way the rocket's supposed to be built. So what this is telling us is that we have to separate our rocket out into two distinct objects at least. So I'm going to go ahead and make a duplicate, turn one off, and what we need to do is remove these fins. These fins are messing with us. So let's go point mode. I'm going to grab these and these. Actually, yeah, we're just going to grab all the points that are obviously not points that we need. Delete. Now you see we're going to get this. Now this is fine, but we're getting a bulge out of these. Now we do want to match our silhouette, but what I'm going to do is just select all the 4 of the offending points, and I'm just going to say go ahead and do a soft interpolation. You know what is something else we can probably do is I'm going to select these 2 bottom points, and I'm going to say subdivide, and now we can delete this other half of the rocket. So we're only worried about, boom, 1/2 of it. Now let's not close it, and now we just work on 1/2, so we don't have to stress out over that. Now I can turn this other rocket on, and we can go perfectly from the side view, and we can make sure that our arc is continuing, and actually it's pretty dang close. So on this one I could, actually I guess it's this one, we can grab this point and does it move? Yeah, okay, so we move this, and I can pull this handle down just a little bit, match that curve a little bit better, go up here, grab this point, which is the other main one. Let's see where the handle goes, right about there. My axis is in the way. I can hit Alt-D, which is a shortcut to hide it, and I could pull that actually in a little bit. And now everything that was inside of this part of it, we wouldn't normally see it, so as long as we get a nice curve, I'm quite pleased with that. So there we go. So let's go ahead and hide that one again. And now we've just got this half arc. And you know what? We're going to deal with our flame separately. So let's go ahead and delete that. We'll pull it in again if we have to. So now that we've got that, and everything should be zeroed out nice and cleanly, we should be able to make our lathe, throw that into the lathe. We're going to get one really nice clean sweep going all the way around. And we can hit NB and change the way this is going to be subdivided. We've actually got quite a few options there. Like we could change our, if we want this to be very evenly subdivided, and I think especially preparing this file for other people, if this is something that's going to be shared, very nice clean geometry is going to be a big plus. And even geometry is going to make it so that people could do something with dynamics and who knows what, like subdivisions. So where I'm inclined to go there would be something like a uniform subdivision. So you see we're getting pretty dang close to square polygons traveling all the way along it. Now the only problem is that areas of more specific detail, like up here, like there isn't quite enough detail to go following this curve perfectly. So that could be, that's a limitation with doing this, and otherwise we have to subdivide it more and more and more and more, and that comes with its own problems as well. But that's fine. Now if we're going to carry along with the idea of the 3D printed rocket, which I think we should, then we're going to want to put a little cavity in here, so it's kind of a place where the rocket could be blasting out from behind. But it's also the way the 2 pieces of plastic from the 3D printer were able to interlock with each other. Those were not glued, they're friction fit. But in any case, let's go ahead and maybe make a nice little cut in our spline right there. And we'll do another cut almost on top of it. Boom, hit escape. So now we got 2 new points there. And now I can grab these 2 points, and I'm going to go ahead and just hit E and hit Alt-D to bring our axis back. I was like, where's my axis? But now we can just grab these 2 points and pull straight up into the air. And as we do that, you see we're going to get, we're going to introduce this cavity into it. And that's actually working pretty well. It's maybe a little smaller than the one that I had. So we could, I want to make sure all of my movements and controls are very precise. Now you see, okay, this is interesting. You see how I can see this point very clearly, but the other point is somewhere in the geometry. So the way I'd select this really quickly is grab that point, grow my selection, deselect that one. So now I've got the 2 points that I wanted. I'm going to move them very precisely on the axis that I want to. And you'll see that the lathe is very imprecise in the way it's matching it. You can see as I pull this, it's actually not changing that piece of geometry because that's just stuck to the nearest available spline. So we got to keep that kind of thing in mind. But I'm not too bothered. Like we've got some tolerance here. If we zoom all the way out, the overall look is going to be very good. So I'm quite okay with that. Based on the way we move things, I'm actually going to tick this down 2 sections to make everything a little bit more square again. That is all looking perfectly fine to me. I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this Lathe Rocket. And what is the next step? Well, I guess if we start implementing the fins is going to be a good next step. There's a lot of other things we might end up changing. But let's go ahead and worry about the fins. So I'm going to make a duplicate of our original spline. I'm going to go and name it, name it fin. Okay, so now we've got a fin, and now essentially we need to do the opposite of what we had done before. So let's go ahead to our side view, and we can turn off the other one. And now we just need to select the fin and everything involved in it, and then grab those points, and now we can hit invert, delete, and now we are isolating pretty much just this fin. Now there's a couple, like first of all, we've got this, this point is shooting upward, And we could fix that probably by hitting E for move. And then if we grab this axis, I could start moving it, but it's going to move both of our points. And what do we hold? Is it control? Nope, not control. Shift. Okay, grabbing shift and grabbing the handle while we're on the move tool is what enabled me to grab it and move. Now, we could let these, and I might even do it, I did this with the 3D printing version, is we could just let this intersect a little bit. You can see I can pull that out a little bit like that. And now it's going to actually pierce inside of the rocket. And that's actually completely fine for some of our purposes. It might not be the absolute cleanest way of modeling it, but it's going to work pretty well here. So we can actually look into some alternatives if we want to blend that in perfectly, and I'm not sure if we will be able to. We might have to do some very careful modeling if we do that. But that by itself is going to go a really long way. Now, now a challenge comes in. It looks like I was actually making the changes on this rocket, so I'm going to rename that one Finn and name this one Rocket. I forgot it's a thing where you can, if you select the spline, even if it's turned off, it still shows up. A little bit weird to me, but that's okay. So now we've got our fin. I've actually got that selected. So now we can go back to our 3D view. We can turn our rocket back on, and you can see we've got this fin. Now we've got a couple different options here of how we would want to actually give this geometry. One is we could put this into, we could make it infinitely thin and put it into a loft. So now we just got a nice flat one. And that, you know, stylistically, that could be completely fine. Alternatively, we can, let's see, what's a good way? Well, we could leave it in the loft, but we can go and make a duplicate of that same spline and go to the front view. And what we could do is grab that entire thing and hit T for scale and scale it down a little bit. And we're going to have to manipulate this a little bit. Let's see if we, is it possible to move the, no, not there. If we go to the axis, yeah, we can temporarily move the axis. I don't even know if it's temporarily, actually. But I want to grab it down to there and scale it down from that point of view. So there we go. It's pretty even all the way around. I could grab some of these points and pull them around if I wanted to. But it's pretty even all the way around. So you see we're actually getting a tiny loft there. So if I were to grab the entire object, not move the points, but the object itself, scoot that entire thing forward, then you can see we can get a little bit of depth on that fin. And that's looking nice. Actually, I did make a small mistake there. I shrunk the entire thing, but this point and that bottom point should not have been shrunken. So you see that I'm actually getting a separation there. Let's go ahead and turn on SSAO so we can see a little bit of a shadow there. It might make that a little bit clearer on the stream as well. Awesome. So now that that is happening, let's go ahead and grab that point and pull them in until we're about even with the other line that we had. Really, it just has to intersect the rocket, but I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it's moving fully in. If we want to maintain that arc, we will have to move this up to match it. So that is fine, and now you can see that that's probably looking a little bit better there. And then we can go back into our loft, and we can change our subdivisions here. So I can drop that down to 2, turn off subdivisions per segment, and I can see there's only a single one. We've got these individual polygons wrapping around the way that they currently are. We can decide if we like that or not, because we could go into our loft and go to caps and say I want to create n-gons instead. So that's a cleaner piece of geometry for working from, but it can also cause some subdivision problems. We've also got, man, there's a lot of decisions to make because we can also change our way we're subdividing here. We could change this to be, instead of adaptive, we could go back once again to uniform. And uniform actually is not making a visual difference there. So yeah, it's changing the way that spline looks, but it looks like this is more about the loft, which is, I guess it's not surprising. But yeah, we actually control that via this, not via the spline. So we could make this lower poly via this. And this is actually super valid depending on what the next step is going to be. If we were to make a subdivision surface and throw it inside there, then it's like, okay, everything gets super evenly rounded out, and now that low poly was justified. But if we're not going to do that, then we want to make sure that this loft has enough subdivisions to actually give us a nice smooth curve out of that. So we can go decently high with that one as well. Now, some of you might have noticed that this is only pulling forward, so we'd actually have to make a this outer one that we pulled forward. I'm going to make an instance of it and put it back inside as the first object. And instead of it moving forward on Z, let's go ahead and move it backwards on Z. So now we have a forward and a backward on there, so we actually have some proper thickness. Now, before we go too far, it's important to note that we also have or we're going to be, the way the rocket's designed in the logo is, even though when you see it silhouetted, I see 2 fins, the way I picture it in reality is 3 fins. So what we could do is go and make a cloner. Let's make sure that the axis for this loft is in the center, which it is. I'm going to go ahead and rename it loft fin. And now we could put that into the cloner. And, ooh, look at that. It's now a submarine, like a sharky submarine, 20,000 leagues under the sea type of thing. But that's not what we're going for. We are going for a radial. Ooh, that's scary as well. Let's go ahead, and that's a cool shape here. I'm going to give a radius of 0. Let's lie it flat on the ground, XZ. And there we go. Now we've got our fins going around. It already looks cool. I think almost any amount of these will look cool if we don't go too far. But the magic number here is 3. So we got 3 fins. But something that I think is important is that the silhouette still look correct. And if we're like this, then the silhouette would essentially be if we're looking at it flat on. So one of the fins is aligned with the camera, but because we're spinning around 3 times, not 4, the silhouette will not be matching the original rocket. So what we're going to have to do is view this from one of the side views. So this side view worked. Which side view is it? It's the right view. Now what I want to do is go and unhide our rocket, the original spline, and I'm going to spin it 90 degrees, and you're going to see the problem. With our rocket, because these are now turned sideways, they're a little bit skinnier, so they don't have the correct silhouette. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on this spline, and now you can see that we can see the correct silhouette. So essentially, we need to scale up our fin on its axis so that the silhouette will match, and that's kind of visually what I want to have happen. So I'm not sure what our proper orientation is here. Let's go ahead, and looks like X is our magic number here. So that is what we're going to scale, is on X. Now, unfortunately, from this point of view, X is the one that we're not seeing. But I think that's fine. Let's go ahead and scale it again. So you can see as I scale it on X, it is stretching out, but it's not pivoting from the correct spot. So I'm actually going to do is, what's the best way to do this? I don't want to lose sight of what we're seeing here, but I guess I can't think of any way around it, actually. I'm going to hit, okay, we're going to hit, oh, this is a little bit weird. It's just a quick way of doing it. I hit Alt-G, and now it's grouped, which won't change anything. But I want to move the group over. I want the pivot spot to be further over, but I don't want to lose the center point, because if we move that axis, it's going to move the fin. So I'm actually going to group it again. So now that null is where it's supposed to be, and now we have another null that I can actually move where it's positioned from. And if we go to this front view, I can actually hit E for move. You can hit K. Actually, it's L. Okay, L for axis. And now we can, what did I just do? Move. Oh, yeah, back to the move tool. So we're on the move tool. We're on the model mode. We're on axis mode. We've got this middle null selected. And I'm going to scoot this over to right there is where I want the pivot from. And now that we've got that, I can turn off the axis. We can go to all 3 views here, and now I'll be able to grab this null, T for scale, and turn my axis back on. And now you can see it's pivoting from the correct spot. And now as I scale here, we can view it here. So now we'll scale. And now we don't have to go too far, but you can see as I scale out that now we have stretched it. But in stretching it, we have now done a pretty good job of matching it, although it's not quite tall enough. So anyway, we also grab the axis. I'm going to move the axis down a little bit. I'm just kind of eyeballing it right there. Turn off the axis, T for scale. We'll scale it up on Y just until that matches there. Now, is this a perfect 100% one-to-one? Almost guaranteed not, but it's close enough for me. I'm quite happy with that. So now even though these fins are technically larger, our silhouette is correct again. And that is what I want to have it be. Cool. So now, in theory, that's all scaled correctly, so we can pull that out of the nulls, and nothing should change, although something did just change. Why would that be changing? Oh, I guess if it goes into that null, is, oh, I somehow moved the axis of that. Easy enough to fix. I moved it out of one of the nulls, and I'm just going to put the axis at 0, 0. And now when I pull it out, it shouldn't move. There we go. Cool. So now we've got that little section of rocket there. And let's see. Now, I guess the next question is, like, for our solid version of the rocket, and we're going to keep this as parametric as we can so people have options when they're working. We just kind of arbitrarily picked the thickness here, but we could pull these out and make these fins fatter if we wanted to. We could We can bevel those if we want to. We could, like I said, we could throw that entire thing into a subdivision surface and round them out some more. And I like the idea of those being rounded a little bit. But I actually had done this, I forgot, but I had done this in the 3D model as well, which is making another copy of that fin. And let's go to a side view, and that this is still the correct side view for that, is we can, what I did on this one is I had scaled it down. Let's go back to the spline directly, and you can see we've got these splines. I guess I can turn the clone off over viewing it from the side view. And the idea here was that I had kind of pinched everything in quite a bit. I'm just going to eyeball this. We can scale these all manually. But the idea is that I kind of pinched in the fin quite a bit to the point where it almost became a two-dimensional line. So we'll pull that in. We pull this one in. Or actually, I'm not even sure if this is the way I did it, but we can do something like this. And I'm going to select all my points and say soft interpolation. It's going to actually, I want to do soft, not hard. Okay, so now you see they all kind of straighten themselves out. That's the same number of points, so it should continue to work. And I'm just kind of scaling these in. The basic idea here, and this is not final, but the basic idea is with that, I could then pull this out further, and you can see we can get a little bit more interesting of a shape being pulled in through the overall fin. If we were to change this to this shape, you see we can get a little bit more of a cool arcing shape. And I actually like that. I mean, I just kind of eyeballed that, but I'm actually liking that a decent amount. I think there's some more manipulation we can do on it, but let's go ahead and do this manually. I'm in the 3D view, but I'm going to be very careful not to change it on Z. So we can go ahead and maybe pull this down more, grab this one, pull it down more. So I think my basic idea would be if these were to come down, and is there a floating point over here? I don't know. I'm going to just kind of wiggle around in the area. There doesn't seem to be. Nope, it just goes from that point to that point. Interesting. Okay, so that means I can pull this one backward. And then that one I can select that point and once again say soft, which is going to do a nice arced interpolation there. And yeah, we're just going to move this around until we like the overall shape that we're getting. So kind of like the idea of that pinching upward a little bit there. We've got a nice arc here. I'm going to even hit scale, T for scale, and scale that up a little bit, get a little bit more of an arc. And then you see eventually this does flatten out there, but even that we could probably manipulate and change a little bit as well. So we are just kind of sculpting out the shape of this rocket. And I do like that. Let's check our mesh flow here. So I would kind of like if this was a little bit more straight. So let's go ahead and find this point wherever it might be. There it is. I just swirled around until I found it. If I pull this over, then you can kind of see we will reveal those points. And I just kind of want that to be there very surface level. So we just control that arc via that. And now I can rotate it and maintain this curve. Even hit T for scale and scale that out a little bit more. I just accidentally clicked one time where I think I wasn't on the Z-axis, so I hit undo. I might not have made a mistake, but I just want to make sure that those are staying as zeroed out as possible. So in order to kind of see the curvature we're going to get, we're going to have to kind of do this not in polygon mode, or not viewing our individual polygons. I'm going to hit NA so we can just kind of see this shape. Now, I do like the way that that shape is looking. We're not going to worry about mirroring it to the other side because right now we are not seeing the other side. I think this one I might want to hit T for scale, scale that up a little bit more, just get a little bit cleaner of an arc. Now, I don't need to match these arcs perfectly. We just want them to have really cool looking transitions from one to the other. That part is important. And then we got this other point here, and we have the option of pulling this up or down. So we can be pretty careful with that, or really whatever we want to do. So, okay, there we go. I'm decently fond of that. I like the way that's looking. I always like these kind of soft but hard edges. And now what we could do, just to curve out this corner, if we're inclined to, is we could make a duplicate of this one again. I'm going to select all and hit T for scale. If we wanted to, we can shift our modeling axis over. So I can actually go to T for scale, modeling axis, grab our X, and then wiggle our X over to this position. So we're over here. And now I could scale it that way. And it just pulls it in a little bit. And now I can scale it down. And the idea here is we've now smoothed out the arc there as well into this flatter section. And that final one, because it's not moved out at all, it's just flat, it should actually give us a pretty dang nice arc in that final position. And I am actually a pretty big fan of that. That is pretty nice looking. I like that. Okay, so now the only thing that's bugging me right here is this little arc. Now, we might end up smoothing this entire thing again anyway, but let's see if we can fix that a little bit. That's going to be the second to last one. We can pull this out. Okay, we don't actually want to pull it out, apparently. Oh, there, I accidentally grabbed Z. That was a problem there. I'm going to hit R for rotate. I'm going to actually rotate this like that. So now I'm getting very direct control over the way that arc is engaging here. I'm actually going to flatten that out a decent amount, pull it up. And I want to follow the way this curvature of the spline is traveling. T for scale, arc that, grab this one. This one is so big now that's fighting that arc, so we can go and rotate that one a little bit. Maybe even center this a little bit more. There you can, now you can see we're getting a little bit more of a nice curve to the overall shape. I'm going to reselect this one. Let's arc that up a little bit more. I'm liking that better. There we go. I'm quite pleased with that. So there we go. We've got one little side of one fin there. And of course, we can just go ahead and make an instance and put that on the opposite side. And let's go ahead to our Z and go, instead of -6, we'll do +6. So that should have pushed it on the opposite. And we'll also make an instance of this one and put that there. And then this one I think will also be essentially -6. And now we've got those mirrored on the other sides perfectly. The reason for making the instances is there's a good chance at some point I'm like, you know what, I'm not quite liking the arc. So now if I update one side, the other side will update as well. In fact, even looking at it right now, I'm going to grab this little arc and rotate it up a little bit. And I'm going to grab that little arc. I'm going to rotate it out a little bit just so that they're lining up a little bit better. And maybe even pull them apart just a hair. There we go. I like that. Cool. So now we've got that fin, and they should have updated symmetrically. We can turn our cloner back on. We can rename it Cloner Fins. And we can go ahead and save this file as live number 2. Let's see, any questions? Nope, looks like we're all good. Yeah, thank you, Scott Benson. I was definitely in axis mode there. Okay, cool. So we got those fins. Now I just want to kind of see everything uniformly. So why don't we go ahead and pull in one of our first colors. Rocket Lasso has some fairly specific colors. Let me go ahead and pop open one of the logos. I'm going to, I don't know if this is actually superficial. Nope, that didn't have the background, which is the color I wanted. I'm just going to go ahead and open up one of our recent documents. File, open recent. Hopefully I can find a... Rocket Lasso episode 1 is live. No, none of these have the gray color. I think this is the gray color. So I'm going to pull this up. So this is like the official gray of Rocket Lasso. Zoop. Okay, there we go. So not anything particularly special. I'm going to just scoot this off to the side, go back to Cinema 4D. Now you guys can't see it, but right on my other monitor, I can see just a hair of it. So I can go into my color, I drop it, and then click it to pull in that color. That's all. That's straightforward. So now that we've done that, that's just kind of the basic color. So now I can apply it to the fins and the rocket just so that we're seeing them more combined, which is what they will eventually be. So now we've got these additional nice soft curves in there. I just want to see if we were to throw this into a subdivision surface. Yeah, there we go. See, now that we throw this in the subdivision surface, you see it's cleaning up all the curves and these sharp arcs, but it's maintaining a really nice silhouette. And we still get this kind of sharp section right here, which I do like. If it's a little extreme, and maybe it is a little extreme, we can grab these 2 points and just hit T for scale, separate those out from each other a little bit, and even move. So I'll move them a little bit. And this arc, I thought I rotated that more before, but maybe I didn't. Yeah, we'll do that. And then even this inner fin, those are pretty close together. So if we wanted those to chill out a little bit, we could separate those. And now you see it'll kind of arc into that and just smoothly disappear into nothing. And that, oh, that's sexy. So yeah, now that subdivision surface is doing a great job. Now if we turn on our polygon view, NB being the shortcut, you can see that we're subdividing it up to 3 times during render time. We could just turn on 1 here, and you'll see it's actually going to be pretty low poly and be clean, or we can go up to 2, and I think 2 might be the magic number there. Now you'll see that this face, because we had it set to n-gons, like that's kind of a messy face, but those are all still quads and triangles, and because it's a clean loft, this isn't affecting the overall curvature of the overall shape. So that is completely fine. We can just leave it that way. If you were concerned with it, I am not. But if you were, you could make one last duplicate of the fin here. We can select all the points, T for scale. I'm going to zero out our x-axis again. And I could just shrink all these down to pretty much nothing. I grabbed the wrong one. Apologies. Let's grab the new fin that we selected. T for scale. Scale these all down. And if we scale this down to 0, then you'll see that, and I don't know, maybe it's worth doing, but you'll see that this will scale them all down to 0. And now we get these cleaner kind of polygons, and eventually the final ones will be triangles, kind of the same way at the top of a sphere looks. So that is, if we turn that off, you can just see that we're scaling them all down. So it's just making it so we control it a little bit better instead of it being n-gons. And you know what, that is, potentially that's a valid thing to have that be slightly cleaner geometry. But you can see if I look on one, so that's one side, and here's the old one. Visually, our final polygons, that doesn't change anything. But you know what? It's a little cleaner, so why not? I'll make an instance of that one as well. We will mirror it to the opposite side as well. And now both sides are going to be these slightly cleaner triangle type of looks. All right. So now we've kind of mechanically made a completely different type of fin over on these sides. Let's go ahead and figure out what we're going to do with... I mean, we can go move on to the flame if we want to. Yeah, I guess maybe making the flame before we move on to, if we are going to do a preparing it for 3D printing mode, we'll do that separately. And then we also have putting in our window in there, which on the 3D printed version, I put like a little rounded cockpit up here. So we can figure all of that out. Okay, so let's do the flame first. So we've got our original rocket spline reference here. I'm going to select the spline, grab one point, UW, UP, which is splitting off the selected ones. So that is now the turned off rocket, and this is now the flame. And now we've got this nice little flame here. We can go ahead and delete one point from one side, and actually, it looks like the way this is set up, I'll delete that point because that's the closed spline. Let's go ahead and unclose that spline. So we got half of it, so we could once again lathe that. So I'm going to copy and paste the lathe, delete, put the flame in there, and boom, we're going to get a perfect little teardrop shape. Now, the way I end up doing this on the 3D, the actual final 3D model is I didn't, let me count the number sides actually. I feel like it was 6, but no, it's clearly more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, okay, so 8. Although, I don't know, in my head it should be 6 instead of 8. Maybe 8 just looked better, but there's a 3-sided rocket, so a 6-sided flame kind of matches that. But let's just figure it out. But in any case, if I want to kind of stylize this a little bit, what we could do is tell this not to lathe around with 24 segments. We'll tell it to lathe around with just 6 segments. And if we change this, you'll see the way our segments are getting subdivided. First of all, let's go ahead and change this to be a uniform one so we get these nice even counts. In fact, we might need to cut that in half, but you'll see that we're only 6-sided on there. If I were to grab our Fong angle, we could lower this, and now you can see that we'll get this smooth looking pretty much all the way up, but we've only got 6 sides to it. Now, in the same way that we lost some thickness by scaling it down, I'm afraid that we lost some thickness here. Maybe not. So let's go ahead and check it out. Actually, that's pretty perfect. And let's check this one. And that continues to be pretty perfect. So apparently 6 is a number that Loft is able to maintain our silhouette perfectly. Actually, that's not entirely true, because this one we didn't spin our object to see. And this is the axis, I think. R for rotate. If we spin it here, I think we're going to find, if I go exactly 90 degrees, it's going to be a little bit skinny. That makes sense. So now we can just get T for scale. Once again, we have to scale it on the red axis, but we're paying attention to this silhouette right here. So let's go ahead and change it on X, and you see I'm just going to make it a little bit wider. So once again, the silhouette is matching. And I guess it depends on the orientation we're seeing it, but I'm fine scaling that up a little bit. So that kind of gives us this little like hexagonal flame, which I do like the look of that. And I think I might like to maintain that. But we do, I mean, there's a couple things. First of all, the logo itself doesn't interconnect, but when it came to the 3D printing, they definitely most certainly did have to interconnect. So we could go and grab our flame. In fact, I'm going to make a copy of that flame and turn it off just in case we want to go back to it. But what we can do here is go back to a side view, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it here. Actually, I'm going to go to a very specific view mode. We're going to go to wireframe, because I want to see this wireframe, but I also want to go to seeing the lines, so we're seeing right through it. And we can see where these bevels are appearing. Slightly strange, but I'm going to go ahead and just cut straight down from there. And I'm going to make a second immediate cut right there. So once again, 2 cuts. I'm going to grab that one, and actually I'm just going to grab that one, UY to grow. And now those other 2 are right on top of each other. So then I can just pull this straight up into the air, and now those should be interlocking themselves pretty well. Now when it came to the 3D, you can see here that like I just don't, it's like that looks a little weird, like interconnecting them like that. So it goes to, does it look better with them just separated out a little bit? So we could just hit undo. And it's like, okay, do we just leave them not connected there? Because I think it still kind of works where like the jet of flame is kind of invisible until it gets a certain distance. Or do we let it be like this? Oops, looks like I undid too many times. I couldn't bring it back. So we could pull it up like that and interconnect it like that. Now, I distinctly don't, I mean, I don't know. I actually don't hate it. But that's definitely not my favorite. So then our other option is inverting our spline selection and pulling the entire thing up into the air a little bit. So now we've changed the silhouette of the logo a little bit, but now the flame is coming right up to the rocket. It's a little bit of a tough call. Now, it came to the 3D printed one. I moved it up like this. This is pretty much what I did. And I'm quite pleased with that end result. So that could be a way of maintaining that. I would not complain about that. So it's kind of, those are kind of the options. We could also deselect that bottom point and just pull it up so that we still have the same tip of the flame, but the whole thing stretches up. And then we're changing the silhouette of the flame, so I don't actually want to do that option. So I think maybe pulling that up a little bit, letting this little transition happen. Like I'm okay with that. Like maybe something like that. I think that's what I'm going to go with for this. But I did kind of like that separation. So I might, especially for anybody who sees this in the future, we can put that other one in here as well, so somebody could turn one off and use the other, and I guess swap the order, but we'll just leave it in there as something that can be referenced if somebody wants to. All right, so that gives us that bit of the model, but something that we definitely have going here is these kind of like soft, like these almost like chiseled edges, so they're still slightly rounded. And I think we can get that effect here with our flame if we go and we create a bevel. And we're going to make the bevel a child of the entire rocket, or the entire flame. Now, something we're going to see right away is if we bevel like this, it's going to bevel every single edge. Every single edge is getting beveled. We don't want that. So what we could do is say limit, for one. Always turn on limit. It just stops things from intersecting on those spots. But we can go ahead and turn on use angle. And now we could just change this threshold and say only bevel certain things up to a certain point. So we want to push that. And luckily, the way this is designed is we can get that bevel traveling along the entire edge without hitting a subdivision that's so subdivided that, what do you call it? That it's catching along the horizontal line. Now, having said that, might not be entirely true, because what I think we're going to need to do here is also put this entire thing into a subdivision surface, and you'll see that, kind of for free, I put that to 2 subdivisions, kind of for free, that kind of gives us this nice little bit of rounding along those edges. But, and then actually I would want to get rid of the Phong limits, and then you can see that we get this rounded edge. So I do like that. But we can go into our bevel, and we could increase our subdivision by 1. Bink. And that's going to sharpen that up a little bit, and it's going to clean up this rounded edge. Like, see how sharp but soft that is? Like, I really like that kind of look. Now, the problem with this is, even if we turn this off, these edges are going to be sharper no matter what. It's just the fact of this bevel. But I kind of want to match our polygon count on the main part of the rocket in case people are deforming it. Having said that, we did kind of go, well, actually, no, we subdivided these fins so that lost our kind of generic poly count. But I would like to maintain it down here where we can. So my inclination is to start decreasing the number of points that we're feeding into this. So as I do this, we're going to lose some fidelity, and we got to be careful about the way we aim. But by decreasing this, let me see. Okay, that clearly is going too far. So what is right there? That feels like the minimum we can get away with. And then once we put in the subdivision surface, it's going to round everything, but now we get slightly better kind of overall subdivisions. Now, one thing I'd like to see, if we turn on, no, there is none here. I'd kind of like to, I kind of wish that we could get a subdivision right through the middle there, but I can't think of any way of doing it without making it editable, and I don't want to make it editable. So I'm actually fine with this. It just makes it so these are a little bit more horizontal looking than vertical, and the only way we could fix that or stop it from being quite so horizontal would be to decrease our height segments here, and you will see that they get more even as we drop down, but we completely lose all fidelity. So yeah, a little bit of a tricky one, but yep, we'll just deal with a slightly higher horizontal poly count there. And let's take a look down here. Yep, that's looking nice and sharp. Everything there is looking great. I am quite pleased with the look of the flame there. So, the next part would probably be, how do we model in, honestly, when I did a lot of these parts, on the 3D model, I could just throw the entire thing into the volumes in R20 and just let them do their thing there. And so it's making the window, the little window I'd put in here, a lot more challenging because that would require very specific modeling bevels. Now we could just plop it in there, but I did have this really nice curve that traveled around it. But I seriously cannot think of any way of getting that looking good without spending an insane amount of modeling time, like to the extent that I don't really think it would be worth it. I'm going to give that a quick save, and you know what? I'm going to actually open up my 3D printed model. Actually, I'm going to open up this one. That is not the right file. I'm going to open up this one. Yeah, so this is actually the final one I was just talking about. And I'm going to delete everything. Actually, not that. I'm going to delete these and copy this. And I'm just doing this because I want to reference the scale of the window. So we'll close that now, paste it in. And now, wow, we're incredibly similar on the scale of the rocket. I guess I probably also made a cube and scaled the cube to be a particular size. All right, so the only thing I'm going to do is move this down. Clearly, wow, that's practically identical. It's crazy. I'm going to just scoot that down, put the base right where the base is. T for scale, scale it up that little bit that we weren't matching. And now this is going to give us really good reference for where the window should go. So rotating that 30 degrees gives us the positional information. So you can see I've got a sphere right there. There's just a sphere where the window's going to be. Cool. Simple, straightforward. Now, I mean, what I could do, and I'm inclined to do it, sort of doing this from scratch, but I could just steal the window out from that rocket, and I'll just explain what it is. So if I hit NB, you can see we've got this nice little rounded window. But what I wanted to do was scale it without making it editable. And one way I like doing that is putting it into a cloner, and it's a cloner with a count of 1. And we can go into the transform tab, and I could scale it up on, I could change the position and scale it up so that it's almost like a parametric scaling that doesn't mess anything up. So that is what I did there. And you'll see that I was doing 3D printing. So I was like, okay, I don't care about point count. I just want lots of polygons so it can be nice and round. And I didn't even care about the orientation here. And I do care about the orientation. So something I might do here actually is spin this 90 degrees inside of it. And then instead of scaling it on Y, we'll leave that at 0. Actually, that's not the scale. That's the scale. Instead of, we're going to go to our Y and say 1.5. And there we scale up that way. And I just like it's kind of the poly flow is a little bit more in the same orientation as the rest of the object. And we can pull back on our poly count here significantly. Let's see, smooth enough. Yeah, something like that looks pretty good. So, yeah, there we go. That is pretty much the extent of putting that window on there. We could apply the same material again. And now we've got a low poly version of that. So I would also probably, I mean, I often like making a single subdivision surface for everything that's going to get subdivided. And we might do that here, actually. But at the same time, that makes it so everything's kind of one model. I don't know. It's always a push and pull. Like, do you want to have 5 different objects with 5 different subdivision surfaces? Or do you want to have one subdivision surface with 5 objects under it? I don't know. Depends on the situation. But we'll go ahead and make another one. I'll make a 2x2 again. We'll drop the window in there. I mean, is it worth subdividing that? I don't know. It's just some consistency. And then we got our overall rocket shape, and then that one can also go into a subdivision surface. We'll also go 2x2. Boom. And now, essentially, we should be seeing like a visual of our final poly count. So you can see that everything is fairly similar. Like this is maybe perhaps a little less subdivided, which is a little surprising, honestly. And then this is pretty heavily subdivided. The wings are maybe a little less subdivided. But, I mean, we've got options there. We can go and grab the wings. Let's go ahead and grab the fins. And we can go into all of our individual splines. And we could, actually, no, it's in the loft. We could start increasing the number of points that travel around our loft if we wanted to. We can also go and increase the subdivisions on U. So we could, I guess it's probably isoparm subdivision? No. Okay, it is this one. So I could go and start increasing that. There we go. So increasing that up to 15 seems to have given us a pretty similar overall poly count to the rest of the rocket. I'm fine with that. And over here, this is just, like I said, this one's going to be sharp no matter what. But if we wanted to, if that was too low a poly count, I would probably just be inclined to increase that by 1. So that's a lot tighter. Or now it's a little smaller than the rest of them, but if you needed it, you could do it that way. But I'm just going to leave it there because I think that's fine. So that is, I think, actually, I would call this pretty much done as far as our base model. I'm going to go ahead and move all of this stuff onto its parent directly. And then we've got, let's go ahead and name everything because we're going to be passing this off to other people. So let's make sure that we make it clean. So we would make a null. We'd call this... let's just call this, I don't know, let's just call it modeled rocket. And we need to also create, I'm going to say remove unused materials. Let's duplicate this material. And I want to get the orange color from the logo. So let's go ahead and pull that in. We don't need, actually let's pull that one off. Don't need that. I'll make sure our overlay is turned off here so we can grab our pure color. I'm going to scoot this off the side a little bit. Back to Cinema 4D. Grab our material editor. I'm going to grab our color picker, and it's just off screen here, but I'm going to just color pick, boop, directly onto that. So now we've got our perfect orange, and we can apply that to our flame. And there we go. That is like the modeled rocket for people to work from. All we have to do is go and rename these. So let's go ahead and name this... let's go and name this one the rocket body. We'll name this one window. And we'll name this one flames. Also, there's the body of the rocket, and then the window comes, and then the fins come, and we'll leave the flame here on the bottom. I also think it might be a slight kindness to have these pivot from the proper spot in case people animate them. So I'm going to grab both the subdivision surface and the lathe, and I'm going to pull these both down until they are lined up with the bottom of the rocket right there. These are all in a null. I'm going to also make sure that this null is lined up right at the base of the rocket itself, not the tip of the... And once again, I'm just eyeballing this. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we'll just pivot that there from the bottom. That should be helpful for people. And let's go ahead and zero out the height here. So we'll put that at Y height 0. And that should all be looking pretty good. I'm quite pleased with that. Actually, at a glance now, these are very sharp. I like sharp, but maybe making them a little less sharp. So I'm thinking about grabbing this bevel and increasing our offset. Boop. And then if we can increase it some more. So you can see I've rounded that out more by increasing the distance that the bevel was traveling. So if we go 1, it's very tight. Go up, up. And not only is it a slightly more even poly count, but we've also got... it just smooths it out overall. So I like the look of that. That is working quite nicely. Now, I'm actually looking and seeing a little bit of a pinch right there that I didn't notice before. So let's see if there's a problem there. I want to make sure that that is nice and super clean before we go. So I'm going to start by selecting all of these points, and there is 0, 0, 0, so that's all flattened out. Let's select this one. This one is only scaled on 2 dimensions, so that one's also in theory fine. Let's select this one. Yeah, they're all still flat, so this is being introduced via potentially the way we're scaling or potentially the way it's subdividing. Although, yeah, that does feel like it's moved in slightly. Now we can see if we select these 2 different fins that it is correct, but we might need to pull this fin out the tiniest hair. Like pull this out just a little bit to make it actually flatten more, or possibly scale it up a little bit. I don't know. Actually, that's a little bit of a stumper. Those cinema's not liking those triangles too much. I think I do. I'm thinking that maybe, why is it point mode, fin, select all. There you go. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. If these points are all scaled down to 0, but if we were to, wow, okay, scale down to 0 goes way down. I mean, not surprisingly, but if we, yeah, the last one is the one we scaled down, Michael. How about deleting it? We can try. Well, if we, yeah, deleting it, it's giving us this arc that we could tell the lathe to create a single object. Oh my goodness, that is no good. Why is it doing that? We could also say quads. We could say triangles. I'm wondering if that normal is inverted. I'm going to actually make this editable for a second. Select all. Oh, yeah, look at that. It's inverted normals. That might actually be creating the problem. I'm not sure. I'm going to undo a few times. Let's get that fin back. So we might be inverting normals at the very beginning there. So our inverted normals are from the cap. So does that just mean our order is backwards? We need to flip this entire thing the other direction? Because if we just say, oh, there is no invert normals. Or maybe there is here. Flip normals. But if we make that editable, I think we still get the same. Well, if I were to delete the this bottom one and make it editable, I think the cap, and it's not one single object. Undo again. Create a single object. Make that editable. Oh, actually, inverting the normals does fix that. So we will just invert the normals. So I'm going to undo one more time. Get that dangerous fin back. Let's create a single object. Let's also flip our normals, which it already was doing interestingly. But you can see that one's still there. We could delete that now. If we turn on our subdivision surface, nope. See, we're still getting those pinching triangles. So there's just, cinema is not liking that so much. I have run into this type of thing before. I am thinking about deleting that fin, copying fin 4, selecting all points, scaling them down, but not scaling them down to 0. But look, as soon as we do this, we're introducing the problem almost immediately. I mean, we could soft interpolate all of these. That actually strangely did seem to help. So if we pull these out to maybe a little bit more of a circle. Select all, soft interpolation again. So now you can see our transition is actually going to that. Now we already talked about how this is entirely flat, but look at this weirdness as we move it. Do you see how, like, on certain kind of Phong angles it kind of freaks out, and other ones it doesn't? So that's a little bit weird. But look, we're still getting this kind of tapering in pinchiness. And yeah, to tell you the truth, I'm not entirely sure what to make of that. Oh man, when we turn on subdivision surface, you can see that we're really getting a problem there. Samuel, you have to dash. That's cool. Yeah, this is we're being real specific here, but once again, the point of this is so that we can take more time on things. But yeah, go do what you got to do. But yeah, this is throwing me off a little bit. And we can take that and rotate it, and look at how those are like flipping out. It's very bizarre. I mean, because this is pretty clean. Like, this isn't crazy. Now our loft, I mean, those get really long. I mean, maybe it doesn't like long polygons. I don't personally see it as a problem. I don't, loop, organic form. I don't think any of these make any difference. Subdivision per segment, that's going to increase the subdivisions by 1, which is also fine. But I don't think any of those are going to change what we just were seeing. Nope, absolutely no change. I actually, something's popping into my head now. Isn't there a thing where yeah, I think there is a thing. Isn't there a thing where when you're doing a lathe, if you just do, is it just 2? I don't know. We have to do a quick experiment. Well, this is on a loft, and loft is specifically the one thing. I'm going to save it, open a new file. Let's go ahead and just make an end side. Let's make a loft. Let's face this upward. I'm going to put this inside the loft. Now we're going to make a duplicate of it. I'm going to pull it up. So now I'm going to make another duplicate and hit T for scale and scale it in. So you'll see this is the effect I think we're getting. This is what's creating the problem. Is it's trying to organically loop around. So one way of fixing that is to say linear interpolation. So linear interpolation might actually fix it, but then it might break some of our other curvatures. So we got to be careful with that. An alternative to fixing that would be to building an intermediary here where we can grab both of these and pull them up a little bit. And then taking the second one and scaling it in a little bit and kind of manually just eyeballing it to be flat. But I think that's the effect that we're getting, is this kind of almost like a pumpkin, the bottom of a pumpkin or something, where you kind of get this bulge out before it bulges in. I think that's the phenomenon that we are observing. So yeah, almost exactly that effect. So how do we combat that? Well, one thing we just saw was we can say linear interpolation. And now it's going to sharpen up that edge, and that then gets very flat. Tell you the truth, I don't hate it. Now we could turn off subdivision per segment. That gets a little weird again. But kind of like, I don't know, what can I say? I'm a sucker for this, the like hard, soft, hard, like that's cool looking. I like it. I like it. All right, we'll keep it that way. I like it. And coincidentally, it solved the problem, but I also like it. The only thing I want to do is, because it's even sharper than it was before, I want to make sure that this width is maintained a little bit more. So let's grab this shape, and I'm just going to carefully scoot that out. We'll grab this one, carefully scoot it out, just maintain that size a little bit more. And then, oops, grab that one and maybe pull it out a little bit, get a little bit more of an arc going. Nice. Oh, that is sharp. I like it. Now, I want to see a little bit more sharpness down here. That's actually this spline. I'm going to tell that to be a soft spline. Let's go ahead and move it more over here. T for scale. Very nice. Grab this one. R for rotate. Rotate that up a little bit more. Ooh, very nice. Very nice. Now we're going to go up to this actual base fin here. Grab this one. Actually, I guess we should probably do something. Well, this would change the silhouette, so we got to be careful with this one. But this one, I do feel like we might want to bring that in a little bit to sharpen that up. And then R for rotate. Pull that up just a hair. T for scale, just a hair. Yeah. Yeah. And then, do you see how we get this sharp edge, but it kind of fades off to nothing? So I either want it to be distinctly there or get rid of it. So why don't we pull this down a little bit, and we'll emphasize it so we can kind of get this little the sharpness down there. So now that, yeah, that sharpness is being maintained a little bit more throughout the entire shape. And I'm very, very glad we made instances out of these. Shrink that down a little. Let's grab this one over here a little bit more. Yeah. I feel like there's a little bit of twisting there. Distinct or not? That's interesting how this is fighting a little bit. Let's look at the edge flow. Yeah, okay. The problem here is that we're getting this twisting because we are putting some twisting in. So the best way to fix this is not difficult. We just need to see it from the side. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we have a reference of our original spline. And now I can feel free to grab this one and move it more outside. And I can say soft, which is what we've been doing with all the other ones. And now you can instantly see how our spline is matching better. Let's go ahead and now we just have to match that arc, so T for scale. Very nice. Now grab the next one and make sure that that one is kind of equivalently matching. Also very nice. Cool. There we go. Now that twisting is gone. Nice, 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 nice. All right, I'm calling it on that fin. There's a surprise. I was like, oh, we're all done with these fins. And then we went back into a bunch. But look how sharp those are. Man, those are nice. Although I will say, if we're giving this to people as the final version, you will see that the tip of the rocket does not have the kind of fidelity that we have in some of these other places. So I think we do need to address that. Like, we're getting all this curvature here, but up here it kind of sharpens out. It is just not as nice looking. So what is a way we can fake it? I wonder, I don't know if this will work. I'm thinking about putting a bevel inside of the rocket. So let's turn off the subdivision surface. We've got a bevel, and this is just applying everywhere. Now we got to be careful. Let's get it down to no subdivisions. Now it's going to start beveling these edges down here for sure. Turn that off. Yeah, it's going to start beveling these, which I actually don't have a problem with. Those were a little bit sharp as it was, so it's going to bevel those. And once again, I've been trying to avoid making it editable, but now this has a certain threshold, and we can't change it without making it editable. Unless we change the way this rocket is subdivided. But remember, we talked about I wanted nice, even subdivisions kind of traveling along it. Now, having said that, we could potentially make a copy of the spline of the rocket. And then let's see if we can current state to object it. And the reason for that, I'm not even sure if that, which is the real one when you current state to object? I think this one is the real one. Let's see if this did what I think it did. Yes, it did. Okay, so what we did is we current state to object that spline, which is a little bit dangerous, but we were keeping the original, so if somebody needs to go back to reference, they can. But now we could go up here to this final one. I could say soft interpolation, and now we're introducing those soft points back in there again. And now when we turn on our lathe, those extra subdivisions can actually have some influence here. And actually, we can probably even just use a knife tool. Yeah, add in a cut there, add in a cut there. Oh, beautiful. So now we can just scoot that out that tiny bit. Scoot this one out that tiny bit. Gotta be careful. Now we'll grab that grow selection. Soft. We have to view this perfectly from the side here. And, oop, not that side, this side. There we go. Okay, so I just want to make sure. Now, these splines kind of visually get in the way of what we're seeing over here, but we should be able to grab any one of these and scoot it. And I just want to make this curve really smooth. Yep, I like that a lot better. So that sneaks in a couple of extra subdivisions up there. Turn on this subdivision. It's going to round it all out really nicely. So the tip's got a few extra subdivisions, but at least it gets nice and pointy up there. Even there, I'm almost still wondering if we pull that up a hair. It's supposed to be kind of like this exponentially tapering thing. It's like a little rounded, almost like a little hint of being rounded there. Actually, I would kind of like it if it was slightly rounded up there. Just the tiniest, like the very, very tip becomes flat. Oh, it's adorable. Grow my selection, scoot it down. Nope, shouldn't have done that. And we can't get too close. Grab these. Soft, better. Couple of ticks upward. Couple more. Right about there. Yep, this is where, I mean, when you go and you do modeling, you can spend a lot of time making sure it's exactly the way you want it to be. That is what I want. Alrighty. Well, hopefully we don't go back and modify that one anymore. But let's go ahead and give that a quick save. Awesome. And now let's go ahead and call that one. I'm going to officially call this one done. Let's collapse this down nice and clean. That is the model rocket. Save. In fact, we'll collapse that one down. Save again. And now let's save as a new version. And let's work on the airtight version where we can use some fun volume modeling. All right, volume modeling. Here we go. I'm going to copy and paste the entire rocket. We're going to hide one of them. And actually, here's a trick I like doing. I think, well, we did turn off some of these rockets, and we turn them on. I don't think it breaks anything, honestly, but oh, it's fine. I was gonna turn everything off underneath it, but let's just not even worry about it. All right, so now we're going to. This part actually shouldn't take too long, honestly. Let's go and make a volume builder and a volume mesher. Let's put the volume builder into the volume mesher, and we're going to start putting in individual elements. Let's put in the rocket body. Boom. And it looks funky right out of the gate. Not surprising because we need to increase our voxel size, or rather decrease our voxel size. But you'll see that as I decrease our voxel size, that we are increasing our poly count. So the smaller we go, we're going to start getting these really nice, clean, kind of sharp, there's all this detail. It gets nice and sharp up there in the tip. But we are just dramatically increasing our poly count. But I think, honestly, this is probably about the level we want it to be. And now we can go ahead and we can put in our window, potentially. So there's our window, and you see it's blobbing in, but here's where things get interesting. I'm going to say, I don't want you to blob in. I want you to subtract. And now we're subtracting that out. I'm not sure if we can do this or not, but then I'm hoping we can say also add it back in again. So we've added in a second one. Now, let's not worry about that one yet, because on this one, what we want to do is do some smoothing. I'm going to say, I want some smoothing. And you see it's actually smoothing everything out. It's actually smoothing out the tip. It's smoothing out the window part. It's smoothing out the bottom. But what's cool about these smoothing layers is you can feed in fields. So here we've got some fields. So why don't we go ahead and feed in a spherical field. The spherical field, I'm going to tell it to go exactly where our subdivision surface is. Actually, the subdivision surface is not where our sphere specifically is. So let's go and put it there. Shift Z, reset PSR. There we go. Now it's where I want it to be. So now I can pull that out, and now we can go ahead and give this some fall off and affect the scale. And now you can see that it is only rounding out this window specifically. In our ramping, I can ramp this up a little bit, make sure it's nice and full power. Now you can see that this area is getting smoothed out. Let's go ahead and call this window. That is getting smoothed out. But the rest of the rocket is not. Now, maybe we do eventually round out the rest of it, but for now, I want to isolate that there. Now, back into our volume builder, I can go ahead and say I want to reintroduce the window again. And now you see the window is back again, but after the smoothing has taken place. So you see that this also very clearly wants some love for smoothing. So we could duplicate the smoothing layer. Can I copy and paste it? No, I can't. Can I drag and hold down Control? Apparently, no, I can't either. All right, fine. I'll just make a new one. Smoothing layer. So we've got a second smoothing layer. Let me make sure this is the new one. Move it above. You'll see it's going to smooth everything out. Once again, nice and super duper smooth. But I also want to put in that same spherical field. It's already in the correct spot. So now you see it's smoothing that out. But now you see it's smoothing out way too much. So I'm going to, oh, by the way, there's some, oh, I click on filter. There we go. So now I can just pull the smoothing back the correct amount so you can see that it will properly smooth. Let's see if some of these other ones, mean curvature has tended to be pretty friendly to me. Where if we put in a few iterations, you see it maintains the detail a little bit better. But we can go and introduce those curves in a little bit more. So you can see how that can blob it down. Having said all that, maybe this isn't what we want to do. Maybe we don't want to introduce it back in via this smoothing way. Maybe it's just cool if it exists outside of it, and we'll put this back in as part of the volume builder, and I'll say subtract. So it's still doing all the same stuff, but now you see we just get the boom, dome, intersect, cool. And as far as a final volume is concerned for a 3D printed model, like this intersection is completely fine. It could handle the two different volumes. So for now, I'm going to leave it like that. Let's go ahead and colorize our entire rocket this way. Now, of course, let's go ahead and add our fins in. So now the fins are in. The instant we put the fins in, you see it's instantly giving us the equivalent for the overall fins. Now, we do want to, let's go ahead and do some overall smoothing here. So we got a specific smoothing for that window, which is fine. But let's add in a smoothing layer for the entire thing. Now, first of all, this is just really cool. It just looks so neat where you can be like, okay, no smoothing. And we can start smoothing it in, and we get a little bit more rounded of a tip up there. And then these rockets will smooth themselves out just that little bit. And if we go way up, then it's going to start smoothing everything out a lot. You got to be careful there because you're going to start erasing out details and start breaking your silhouette. Now, we also have other algorithms. I mean, I haven't played with all these enough to know like everything they do. So let's just click on mean. Doesn't seem to do much. I mean, it doesn't do anything special. But mean curvature, this one, you see how this one is giving us a smoothness there, but maintaining our details overall. So I do tend to like this one. Let's give it a couple iterations. You see it's actually doing a pretty nice job of smoothing that out. But to tell you the truth, like it's still a little bit chunky. There's still a little bit of a jagginess there. Now, definitely something you do when we're doing these is create a smoothing deformer. I'm going to go ahead and make that the put that as a child of the mesh. So this is actually calculating afterward. And now you see this is no smoothing, but we can start introducing the smoothing back in again, and that's starting to do a pretty. Actually, that's stiffness. This is no smoothing. We can start pulling it in, and as we do, it's actually taking the edge off of these edges. So now we can smooth those out a bit like that. So it's kind of like you got to find that nice middle ground between the volume smoothing and then the kind of the external smoothing. And even have that like this one's the mean, but we could also just make another smoothing layer, and a little bit of that can go a long way for the overall shape of the object. Now, having done everything we just did, that's the mean curvature. I want that. The smoothing here. Sometimes the layers don't quite select. You gotta be real careful here. I think there's a bug in the interface here. But yeah, the smoothing is the one that's going to be like a kind of a blunt hammer. But I do feel like a little bit of it goes a long way. I wonder if voxel distance changes anything. I'm not sure. But we can increase the iterations. I don't know. A lot of the stuff is just like start tinkering around. Those will slow you down quite a bit, though, if you're going to keep it parametric. Now, having done all of that, we got, first of all, a couple options. We could just increase our resolution. I could put this down to like 0.5, and now there's just more polygons. You see everything sharpened up quite a bit, but you see we reintroduced our detail back in here. Now we're going to be having a ton of polygons here, and if we're okay with that, this is giving better results. It just straight up looks better. So I do like maintaining the sharpness on these shapes overall, so I think I'm going to keep it. Having said that, I want one of the cool things we can do with our volume builders, we can get a better transition into our fins here. So let's look into that. Let's go ahead and we're going to create another smoothing layer as if we didn't have enough of them. And that's this new one up on top. And let's just even rename this one fins. So this smoothing layer, and you can see that it is smoothing everything out quite a bit. If we turn it off, you see everything quite chunky. If we turn it on, it's smoothing these out quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and actually, I'm going to try changing our voxel distance just because I don't know what it does. Okay, actually changing that is making everything smooth out even more without doing more iteration. So that might be a nice way of getting additional smoothing. Don't want to go overboard. But yeah, something like that. I'd like that transition a little bit more. But I don't want to lose the rest of the detail in the rest of the rockets. But we already saw that in a field, we can go and add in other fall-offs. So let's go ahead and create a capsule field. And now we got a capsule. I'm going to hit T for scale. I'm going to scale it down. The smoothing and everything, you can see how everything's going a lot slower. My frame rate's dropping really low. Once we make all this editable, we'll kind of reintroduce the smoothness back in again. But I'm going to go and take this capsule, and all we want this to do is start smoothing out these very specific areas. So let's go ahead and we can, this is something that's a little surprising. It's a little weird, but on the top and bottom radius, it's actually separate. We can do the top radius different than the bottom one. That's fine. If we select both parameters and we hold down control as we drag, we can change both of them simultaneously, if you didn't know that. I want to just make sure I'm grabbing the parts of the fin I actually want to smooth out. And then we've got our height, which seems a little high. Let's shrink that down. No, not that much. Right about there. Scoot that up. And then we've also got our remapping, so I could make this more powerful up until about there. Yep, full smoothing up to about that point, and it transitions out. Now, unfortunately, a problem I'm seeing here is with all the smoothing we're doing, where it transitions out from one to the other, we're getting this kind of like this little transition there. And the best way to combat that is giving there more time for it to do the transition. But it's just kind of a push and pull now between how long are we going to let that transition from one shape to the other one. So I feel like that is acceptable. But the more we go out, the more it's going to smooth it. So yeah, slightly tricky. And I do want to increase this inner one until essentially we see it pop out of the rocket just slightly, so it's getting as much power as possible. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, there's a little bit of a transition there, but it's still pretty neat. It does mess up the silhouette a little bit, I will be honest. So what's a good way of fixing that? I mean, we could subtract something else out. We could transition in a little bit differently. I could grab this entire capsule shape and start pulling it down. So as we pass out of the top, the transition on the top will be sharper. So yeah, as I pull down, you see the top, it's now transitioning in. Actually, I think that's actually, I'm going to undo. I think that's actually the method I want to go with. So it's less smooth up top and gets smoother as it goes down. But now you get that nice soft transition there, but you still get the silhouette maintained. Overall, I think that's my preferred method there. I'm going to give that a quick save. And that's all looking good. And to be perfectly honest, this bottom one is already a perfect volume. We could voxelize it if we wanted to, but it's not going to change anything. I mean, we could use it to add some additional smoothing, but I'm actually quite pleased with the smoothing overall there. But you will see our mesh count has changed quite a bit. Just for fun, why not? I'm going to copy and paste the entire setup here. Let's go and delete everything out from it, delete all of these out from it, and let's go ahead and throw the flame in. So we've kind of got a, let's just see if this does anything. Keep in mind our smoothing is already turned on down here. So you can see that's going to smooth things out a little bit. But visually, I do actually see a little bit of smoothing. It's not changed silhouette at all, which is almost exactly what you want. So that's all changing. It's voxelizing it. What the good thing here is you will see that we're going to get identical kind of mesh counts. So we get this really nice clean mesh count transitioning from one to the other. Having done that, I don't know, we can jump into the mesh builder and we could say, let's add a smoothing layer. And now it will smooth it all out. And those get a little more bulbous. Filter. So yeah, there's none. And then here's as we start smoothing it out. You still see we have these flat planes, but it does give us a little bit of a transition. So yeah, for the most part, that is what we do with our volume building. So Yeah, this would be ready for sending to the 3D printer. I've got two different objects. I would scale it to the proper scale for it being in the real world, and that would be all I would do. Actually, that's not entirely true because, and I think we should do this as an option if anybody wants to. I'm going to give that a quick save. If I jump into this other file, you're going to actually see, no, actually you won't see it there. I have to open up my 3D printing model. Logo, 3D printing, Rocket. I'm going to open up number 6. Now this is going to be incredibly tiny, but you'll see that I actually embedded the word Rocket Lasso into it. And I think that would be, and then there's also this hole back here for putting the stick on it. So I don't know if we should put too much worry and effort into that, but it could be kind of fun to just introduce those as elements. Why not? So what we could do is, I think that's the rocket, right? Yeah, that's the rocket. So is there any detail here? That's the flame. We don't need that. This is the overall rocket. So I'm just going to scale this up to the proper size, and then we can take a look at the text. But it's kind of a pain to put this text in the proper rotational position, so I'd rather just take it from here. So let's go ahead and copy this, close it, because I don't want to accidentally save it later. There we go. Paste. Now this, I imagine, is going to end up being incredibly tiny. So let's say what the scale is. Or not scale, let's look at what the size is. Yeah, it's pretty small. So let's go to scale. I'm going to say 10, 10, 10, apply. There we go. So it pops up to be up, not far away from our scale here. And now you can see that this the way I had to print the rocket was kind of from nose to tail. So I'm just going to scoot this one up. And let's go ahead and spin it around. So we give that a little rotation. We can see this is the one. Put 180 down on there. And unfortunately, I mean, the volume, all this volume stuff we're doing is slowing everything down just because it's not going to visually help us. Let's go ahead and turn off our volumes of the new one so we can just deal with the volume of the old one. T for scale. Scale, 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 scale. Whoa. I'm only getting like 1 frame a second there, so I have to let it refresh before I pull too far. So let's go ahead and scoot this one up again. I accidentally missed the green arrow. I can hit undo because I want to be, I guess I can just reposition that. And now we can hit T for scale again and just scale this down. Down, down, down. A little bit more. Nice. Okay, so that should be pretty closely aligned. And the only thing we need to do is spin it, I think 30 degrees. Nice. Look how nicely those are matching each other. Okay, cool. So the entire point of that is now we can just steal out the text and steal out the little nub. So that is the entire point of that, was just so we could do this and make sure they were matching. So we can cover this real easy. You can see I have got text here, and it's just the logo imported again. And you'll also see that I deleted out, I got 2 different paths here. I got this, I got the inner part of the R and the inner part of the A, and I actually yanked those out as parts of it so that those are not getting extruded because that was too much detail for the printer to handle. And so I just deleted those out. And then the only other thing is I rotated this and I put a bend deformer. And the bend deformer is set to unlimited, so it's bending forever, and it's just matching the curvature of that rocket a little bit. Not even necessarily perfectly, but pretty closely. So now that we've got that, we can go ahead and throw in the cylinder as a child of our volume builder. Let's go ahead and turn those on again. And now you can see that, oh, now we need to stop that from being a hook here. I'm going to tell it to be a subtraction. So now it's going to put the hole in there, and now we can move this down a couple of smoothing layers. I'm just going to move it all the way down to the bottom because it can subtract there. And I want any of these smoothing layers that are being applied to apply the smoothing to it as well. And now let's go ahead and throw in the text. And now the text is going to blob outward, of course, which is cool. But let's go ahead and have it blob, or I'm going to subtract it. So let's say subtract. And I was going to take that bite out of it. I'm going to go ahead and hide our bend deformer because I always think it's very visually distracting in the screen. And let's see, I'm going to try and move that below a couple of these levels as well. Now, so we got to be careful, because if I move it down too far, in fact, if I move it there, it is smoothing out based on the fins. So I'm going to actually rearrange these layers, which shouldn't affect anything. But now we just have this nice overall smoothing, which is pretty weak. And the fins are there. Smoothing layer, that's a Gaussian. I think this is the mean curvature. That might be the one we want to move up. There we go. So by moving that up, you see we're getting a little bit of curvature in here, so these just blend in a little bit better. And then that becomes the bitten out shape. So modeling this way, I mean, it's such a great additive process after the fact, or subtractive process even, to like add in these little extra bits of detail here at the end. So I'm going to leave that this kind of in an editable form, if or in this form, if people wanted to potentially work with that and have the funny thing here. But now it's like a full-on version of the what got sent to the 3D printer to print. So let's go ahead and clean all of this up. I'm going to put the capsules in there, so those can also be children. Text, I think that's clear enough. Here's the rocket body. All these are well named. Let's rename the cylinder. We'll just name this, I don't know, paperclip. It's the paperclip hole. And then we can go ahead and we already got that smoothing. This is the flame. So let's go ahead and rename this volume measure flame. This one is volume measure rocket. Those can collapse down. We're going to make a null and put those both inside of that. And we're going to just call this, let's see, this first one was a rocket. That's modeled rocket. And this one will be volume rocket. I'm going to call that volume, well, I don't know. Like when I'm preparing a file for people, I'm going to make the assumption that people know that they could make this editable. In fact, we could say make editable. Just in case. I don't pass files off to other people very often like this, where it's supposed to be like a really clean thing. You know, when I'm doing live streams, typically it's just like, hey, throw stuff out there. But I just want to make sure this is really organized. But I don't want to muddy up the entire file by making things editable. So yeah, people can make these editable. If you're going to be flying around with these volume measures, it's going to refresh every frame. It's going to take forever. But if you make them editable, it'll probably be pretty quick. So yeah, now we got that going. So that's our volume rocket. And then the last one we had talked about was maybe making this look like it had been built by the 3D printer, and by making a whole bunch of like lines spinning around it. I'm trying to think if that's even something we should try and tackle. I'm going to go ahead and give this a save. I'm going to save over number 2. It's a good, or number 3. It's a find master file. So if we were to emulate the way this is going to spiral, really what we end up getting is a whole series of cuts here, all the way up, and the that could be cool, but yes. So it's like, okay, do we build it literally with geometry so we could get a whole series of cuts traveling up this thing wherever it's intersecting? That's what gets created, and then outline those, make them splines, and sweep them. That's an option. But I feel like just as easily, and I don't want to. Those can be the same. I don't want to step on people's toes or make presumptions, but it's the kind of thing where you could just make another material here and throw this material on here and say that this one should be 3D printed. And on this one, we can probably just do something with our bump. So we can go into our bump map and say, well, we could probably do it with a noise, but let's do it with I guess a gradient is probably our best bet. I'm going to do a gradient, and we'll have this push out and then back in again. And typically that would curve out a little bit more. Something like that. And we will make this H for horizontal, or I'm sorry, a V for horizontal. And apply this new one on that overall mesh. Let's make sure there's no, I don't need any submaterials. I'm going to select all identical children tags and deselect that one. So now I can hit delete. And now I deleted all the extra tags that might have been living down there. So now this is just the one applied. So that is in the bump channel. I'm going to go ahead and actually this is something that's typically a little bit of a pain. But like gradients are really, really, really subtle when it comes to bumps. So let's go ahead and set this to a flat projection. So I'm going to say not UV mapped, but flat. And there's our flat projection. I get T for scale. I'm going to scale this way down. So in theory, let's just scoot this up. That is a single line. This is one line of... Oh, and I forgot to move the window up here. That is also there. This is one line of thickness. Now, that's still way too big, so I'm going to get T for scale. So it's getting nice and small. So let's go ahead and hit render. And now you are seeing, indeed, these little bump lines. Bump, bump, bump. I have to say, it looks a little clunky, and it's really subtle. So let's change this to be... Currently, they're all set to smooth, which is good, but it's not as smooth as I kind of would have liked. Do we need to make it a little more... I mean, it'd also be smart to get a normal map to do this. Render. But yeah, you can see we got all these arcs, and then if I were to shrink it even more, T for scale, shrink it down, then we're going to start actually getting the layer lines in a similar-ish way, and we'd want to probably crank our bump a little bit higher. Yeah, so something like that. I mean, I don't want to... I mean, I'm not even sure if this is having an effect, so I'm going to say times 10. Okay, clearly having an effect. So, 1,000. But yeah, I've always found that when you apply the bump via these gradients, it's incredibly subtle. But just by doing that, I mean, that's actually pretty similar to the way the layer lines would look in the 3D printing. Although, interestingly, what is this transition happening here? Look at that. It kind of twists from one angle to another. It's a little strange. Now, right now, we're doing a flat projection, so I wonder if that's flipping from one direction to the other. I bet we could get around that, actually, by going to cylindrical. Now we got cylindrical projection and render. Yeah, there we go. That fixed that. The bump is still pretty strong, but we're getting a pretty nice spiral, and we could even copy this down to that object as well. Onto that circle. So yeah, now it's going to print. It looks like it's kind of printing around. So honestly, I don't want to make any assumptions that people wouldn't be able to figure this out if they want to. I don't want to go and do a whole big old thing of geometry. We can leave this in here as a reference, but you also see that if we're not careful, we're going to start getting a really bad moire pattern. So already I can clearly see a moire pattern going on there. It's going to be entirely dependent on the when you render, what do you call it, the anti-aliasing, and also a combination of that with our layer lines. Now you got to keep in mind when you're 3D printing, I could 3D print at different layer line depths. So I just scaled up our cylinder a bunch of times, and now it's a thicker. It's almost like it's a thicker plastic that we're applying on it overall, and that would be applying like that. So there's some interesting different details. I'm going to go ahead and, even here, we got our gradients, but I could say put this into a layer shader. Let's go ahead and put this into a noise. Now, our noise is going to be incredibly overpowered. Remember I was just saying where the we have to make the gradient incredibly strong to make it behave kind of like a normal shape. But what I want to do is get this normal going, or I'm sorry, get this noise going on top of it. So we're going to put a very small percentage, but I want to get the proper scale too. It looks like, okay, there we go. So we can start making that bigger. That already looks kind of cool. I like those imperfections. So you can see we're getting these lumps, and that's cool. But what I actually want to do is stretch these out on X and Z. So now you can see we get these more individualized lines. In fact, let's put another 0 on each of those. So that's more on a layer per layer basis. And now we've almost got like this imperfection slider. So we put that down to 0. We get these really nice, like clean lines, like a really clean print. But now if we start ticking these up a little bit, just a few percent, you're going to start getting these little imperfections where the bump is stronger or weaker. And if you were to crank it, then now you've got like, well, okay, that's too high no matter what. But start doing something like this, and like you get, this is actually not inaccurate to the way it actually printed. And that's really cool looking. I'm actually kind of shocked at how much that looks like the actual model sitting next to me. I'm going to go a little bit easy, even though I like that. I'm going to go a little easier on it, just a couple of imperfections, and that's looking pretty good. Yeah, Scott's asking about geometry slicing, and yeah, there are definitely techniques that we could go and do it. It was more of, is it worth the amount of time and geometry that would be created to do that, versus just something really simple like this bump material. And I feel like this bump material is a really good way to go. Like, this is clean, it looks nice. Like, I like that. So, you know, we'll just go ahead and leave that there. I'm going to make a duplicate of it, and we will. What's the best way of doing it? I'm just gonna make a duplicate of it and go to the color, and I'm just gonna eyedrop that same orange off of the Photoshop document, which is just off screen. So now I can also. I'm actually going to steal the texture tag because it's applied the way I want it to be, and apply that as well. So now that should also be 3D printed. And there we go. Now we got our 3D printed rocket. I'm actually quite pleased with that. Actually, before we did that, I did want to go through and just for fun to see if it did anything, was also go into the bump and make another duplicate of that noise. And let's chill these out. So we're back to normal. And now you're going to see we get all these little blobbies everywhere. And this is more about like, hey, should we just add in some additional layer of imperfections? We could go and change this to something like a Naki. So now you see we're going to get these all these little imperfections, scale that up quite a bit. Yeah, something like that. Maybe we could also go something messier with the infamous Luca. And so with Luca, it makes things real messy. So I tend to scale that one up a lot. Even that's not going to be enough, but we could scale that up. So you can see just some messiness there. So, I mean, there's just a bunch of different types of messiness here. FBM is a fun one where it's a bunch of different noise layers layered up on top of each other. So it's almost like no matter how big you make it, it's going to keep having more detail. But the basic idea here is let's have it continue following the layer lines a little bit. I'm going to double the X and Z, so there's a little bit of stretchiness. But if we were to take this one and also just put a little bit of an overlay, we can start getting like introducing like some fine little imperfections on top of it. And that kind of thing, I don't know, it's fun to add in these extra layers. It depends. This is almost like, okay, how has our plastic been affected? So cranking this up a lot, it's good to crank it up and see what we're actually feeding in, because I thought that one might be neat, but it wasn't. So we can try that. Like, okay, this is almost like a little imperfection-y layer, where it's almost like we're getting little notches and whatnot. So we could have this come through just a little bit of a percent. So we get like these little scratchy imperfections on there as well. I mean, just layering up that stuff is fun. I enjoy adding those in. And the more that we stretch it on the X and the Z, the more it's going to kind of follow our contour, and you can get those imperfections that way. But I was kind of going for this one not being specifically line-based, more like it was chipped or knocked or bumped around. So just a fun additional layer to put on that. Scott saying, unless you wanted to animate the rocket being 3D printed, if we're going to slice it up, well, in that case, I'll leave that up to the individual to figure that challenge out. But applying this horizontal material was shockingly simple. I'm kind of blown away. So that is looking fun. So yeah, there's the, let's just call it, that's the rocket. Let's call that correctly, a rocket, and we'll call this one Flame. So there we go. We've got those two done. Now a lot of stuff goes to some very tricky specific details. Like we could do a lot more variance on here if we go and we hide that and we pull back our original rocket. Right now, these fins are just straight up intersecting our base model. So do we put in effort to stopping that from happening? Like right now, this top part is just straight up intersecting the model. Do we blend those two models into each other? That kind of stuff can be incredibly time consuming. That stuff can get insane. So I don't know what to and we could also just do a clean one where we Boolean it out. We could Boolean out that shape and have them be separate. But I mean, on one level, I don't see any specific reason to do that. We've already got a volume version where it's hollow on the inside. So yeah, we do get a lot of little choices of ways of cleaning up. I'm going to say something on the tip of this rocket is still bugging me. Yeah, it's that shape. It's this spline. I think I want this point to split the difference a little bit better. Soft out. Which angle here? Yeah, that's transitioning in a little bit better already. Soft interpolation. Better? Slightly better. Sometimes a pixel is just too big of a unit. Like a single tick over the mouse is just a little too much. Anyway, what was I saying? What was I saying? Oh yeah, like merging all these fins in and making those the same object. Modeling in the windshield. Like those are fun things. Those are good details, but at what point are they necessary? Like, really, you shouldn't spend any more time on something than it is necessary to get across what you need it to be. I remember, it was the kind of thing when I was first doing a lot of 3D, I was like obsessed with realism, even though it was terrible. I was obsessed with realism. And, but I don't want to say realism. I was obsessed with unnecessary detail. If I was modeling a desk and we're only seeing the desk from the front, I would still want to model the drawers from the back just in case I ever use the desk again. And I never did. I never did use the desk again. So that was completely wasted time. So definitely something I learned was like, okay, if it's not something we're ever going to see, don't worry about it. These just intersecting with the model, that's completely acceptable unless there's a reason that we'd be having to see inside of the rocket. Now, the rest of this I'm going to leave open to interpretation. There's a lot of fun things we could do. We could like put rivets in on it. We could put like a door on it. We could put a ladder coming down. There's a lot of extra detail that we could be feeding into here, but we're not going to worry about all of those details. One thing I am going to put in the file, though, is going to be a one quick kind of test of a way I like animating the flame. And this would be a good way of getting a little uniformity between people if they want to animate the flame this way. Although, and it'd also be cool maybe to make a light-based one of flame coming out here, just as like some, once again, some raw material for people to work from. Although I don't want to go overboard. I don't want to solve too many problems for people. But we've got this subdivided model. Do we want to? I don't. Yeah, this has enough geometry, I think. So we're going to do the effects in only the flame here. In fact, flame animation test. So this will be just for some people if they want it. So we'll scoot this one off to the side. We'll move it exactly 100 units over. Is the whole rocket a 45-degree angle? It might be interesting. Okay, so anyway, unimportant detail. Let's go ahead and create a, actually, Maxon said that the plane effector calculates slightly faster. So we're going to use a plane effector. We're going to go to MoGraph. We're going to make a plane effector, and we're going to put the plane effector down here after the bevel. So this is going to be a deformer after the bevel. What is it doing? It is deforming. What is it deforming? It's deforming points. So right now it's pushing all the points upward based on their relative normal. I'm going to tell it that it's based off the effector, and right now you see it pushed all of them up on Y. So it's a deformer. It just pushes up on Y. Something to keep in mind. That's pretty useful. But what we actually want this to do is deform on X. So I'm going to say deform on X 100. Oh, and that put it back in its original position. That's funny. Let's say 50. Now I'm going to create a fall off linear field. So now we got a linear field. I'm going to grab the linear field. I'm going to say I want you to be Y plus. So, or is it Y minus? I think it's Y minus. So we can go and shrink the length down. And what is happening is this flame is now being affected by this plane field. So we could scale this up some more, pull it down, and now you can see that with this, it is actually deforming that off to the side. You know what? I just realized we should have done the displacement deformer. I'm going to save this. I'm going to rescue that linear field, delete that. Scratch that, start again. We're going to do a displacement because even though this the plane effector calculates faster, it does not calculate faster than the shader effector, and that's what we're going to be doing the effect of. So anyway, in our displacer, we're going to feed in a noise, and now the noise is going to affect not everything. I want to only affect the planar direction of X. So it's going to go on X direction. Now in our displacer, let's go ahead and go to the fall offs and feed it that linear field. So now it fades off as it goes down. Awesome. We can even hit T for scale that up a little bit. Also, let's zero out our displacer. Boom, boom. Okay, so you see that's wiggling off the side. Now, why don't we go ahead and, sorry, undo. I'm going to go ahead and scale up this noise. So let's go ahead and scale up to, I don't know, 500? Nope, too much. 200? Yeah, maybe. Increase the contrast a little bit, and let's go ahead and give it some animation speed and hit play. So you see I added some animation speed on X, or so X, Y, Z. So I told it to animate down on Y with some speed. So that is now animating downward. We are getting a big, giant, hiccupy refresh every start of the frame because we still have our volume rocket in here. So I'm actually going to just turn off the builders, and I think that will actually speed everything up quite a bit. Yeah, we got lots of frames per second now. Although the builder is probably also doing the big calculation at the beginning, so I'm going to turn those off as well. We'll just remember to turn them back on again. There we go. So yeah, now we got this nice little wiggle going, and that's only on X. But we got a couple different things we do. First of all, we can go into our noise there. Let's go ahead and add a 0. So now they're a lot bigger, so you see the wiggle is a little bit more consistent. We can change the speed by increasing the movement speed, so now we're traveling down on the X. Now we can add a second displacer. And the second displacer, I'm going to say, I want you deforming only on the Z+. And I'm going to delete that linear field because this linear field can be shared among all of them. So we'll just make sure that that is fed in. So they both have the same linear field. And now in one displacer, I'm just going to go ahead and give it the exact same noise except a different seed so that they're not identical. So now you see we're getting this nice little wiggle. So yeah, now it's just like how much do we want that to deform? I could increase this, and now you can see we're going to be getting a bigger wiggle traveling downward. The effect is more prominent as we go down. If it's a bigger wiggle, maybe this will look better if it's a bigger flame. So now by increasing the scale of flame, look, this is behaving like a candle. So that might be fun, but maybe if we're doing that, we have to crank up the speed. So yeah, now it's more like a candle, but it's traveling back and forth. So really it just turns into like this balancing act. Like, do you want a smaller one that's traveling less fast? Or do you want them bigger and smaller? Do you want the effect not to push out so much? In addition to this, we can also have the third displacer. And this one I'm going to rename. Let's go ahead and rename it Y. Let's call this one X. And of course, Z. On this Y one, it's going to be pushing out on Y. So let's change this to, I think, Y minus, maybe Y plus. Hard to tell. And what this one should be doing is probably scaling up quite a bit. So let's say 500. And I'm going to have it displace a lot more. So let's have it push down. So now you see it's actually pushing this down a lot more. It is continuing to add to the effect as if this is a candle. Crank that up. And now, yeah, now we're getting this candle effect. Now, I got to say, maybe let's go easier on the contrast. I mean, I like the effect, but right now it's so big and kind of powerful that it's overwhelming everything. So I think we need this to not be quite as strong. It can't be pushing it nearly as much, but I like the idea of this pushing. Now, an important detail here is the order of operations. If I move this earlier, it's going to change the behavior because this is getting calculated before the X and the Z are displacing. So some of those details are important. This might work better, actually, if we extend this here. Yeah, well, it still pushes up. Right now it is intensity centered. We could just tell it to be intensity, which actually is just seeming to push it up. So I guess this distance we'd want to go negative. So now it can only get longer. So now it's traveling downward, and as it travels downward, it gets longer. It's got nothing to do with the waviness back and forth. It just has to do with the power of it traveling down. So if we were to crank this up to increase the speeds, yeah, it's pretty interesting. Like, that's actually just affecting the flickering. We should probably look at it in isolation so you can see what it's actually doing. So, not even to get into it, and I think I'm going to make this video available for the people in the chain project just because I want them to see how this got built. But you can see with this going so fast, we're getting this really cool, like, flickering. It's almost like a flame, but it's also maybe the way like a flame would be coming out from the back of a rocket. So that, maybe that's cool. Maybe that's what we leave it. We leave it like this jitteriness. That's pretty cool. And we can introduce the X and the Z back in again, but maybe we chill those way out, like just a little bit of waviness left and right. Or maybe we have those, crank up their speed. So they're also going super crazy fast, but with very little effect, on it. So I don't know, like a million different ways of combining this. And it's pretty neat and interesting. So I'm actually just going to leave this like it is as a animation experiment. So if anybody wanted to pop that open and experiment, then that's something cool that they can work with. Now, when it comes to the actual final thing, I think that I didn't want to go too far with this. I want to leave a lot of things open for people to tinker with. So I don't even know if I would include this in the file. But just as a way of talking about it, keep in mind you can also do some visible light type of flames where we could make a parallel spotlight, and you see you get a cylindrical shape. Aim this downward, and you could tell this to be a no illumination, and I want it to be a visible light. And now when we render, we actually get this fall off, and with that fall off we can go and do things like turn on colored edge fall off, and then we can use the gradient, and we can do things like make this very orange, and now that might be on the outer edge. Let's invert that. Fall off linear. That's weird. It's E direction only, maybe. I thought usually we could see a difference in the gradient. Maybe they changed something, because I'd swear that would colorize it. Maybe oh, that's details. Maybe this is the color. Oh, sorry, I was on the wrong gradient. Haha. So we can go here, and now you can see we get some colored fall off in our gradient. You have different controls over the inner distance, the inner edge. We can say don't use the edge fall off, and now it's going to be a full cylinder. Use the edge fall off with 100%. Now it's going to fade off to the edges more. And then we've got this gradient, but you could also pull this gradient over and move this one in and say black, and now it's actually going to fade into the black and then travel downward. And then if you were to duplicate that light a second time, and now this one will maybe make a little bit brighter of a yellow, and go to noise. We can go into the visibility of it and then change this to a wave. I've always liked the wavy turbulence. It's very metallic looking. And then we can crank our contrast really high, lower our brightness way down until we see kind of this high contrast stuff. And now you can see we get this waviness here. So if we were to change our visibility scale smaller on these edges, then we can start stretching our line out, I think. Make that really long. It looks like these are not, because I rotated it, this orientation is not corresponding, so we'd actually have to maybe stretch that one. I'm just guessing. Nope, I guessed wrong. Third time's the charm. Can't be wrong again. So now you see we get these streaks traveling upward. So by changing these properties, you can see we can stretch it down. And then this also has a wind, so we can give that a wind speed. If we hit play, we can't see in the viewport, but if we rendered, then this would be traveling downward. I think possibly upward, but I think downward. So yeah, you can go and create some interesting looking flames on this kind of stuff as well. And there's just a lot of really fun, cool ways of combining stuff. You can use volume lights, and obviously there's lots of stuff in the third-party renderers as well. So yeah, just wanted to throw out a couple of these extra details for anybody participating in this group project. Cranking up the brightness here. Yeah, boom, look, start getting these really bright ones. You can build glows. You can throw so many things in there. Grab these T for scale those down until it's a little bit more size for the rocket. And look at that. We've got an instant jet of flame ready here. Keep in mind it would be really fun in it to be throwing particles out. You could be running a stream of particles you could be running a stream of particles as an emitter from X particles. You could be doing it from thingy particles. You could even, and this is just for the stream, and then I think I'm going to wrap up because we've been going for more than 2 hours. You could even make a helix, and then with the helix make a straight spline. And now we got straight spline. I face it on X and Z. Pull this off to the side. So now you see you've actually got spline facing straight up. I actually want to go down. So we got a spline facing straight down. I'm just going to make a very, very low poly sphere. Yeah, actually that's fine. I'm going to leave it all low poly there. But you could even put this into a cloner and clone onto an object. And if the object you're cloning onto is a spline, you get some really fun controls here, like a rate. So we've got a rate here, and if we go and we crank that rate up and we give it a rate variation, what's going to happen is these are constantly traveling downward. It might be a little fast to see. These are constantly traveling downward, and the little rate variation is going to separate the way those are traveling down. And then, of course, if you were to make a cloner and make a plane effector, we can make the plane effector affect the scale, uniform scale of -1, so they shrink down to nothing, create a fall off, and set the fall off to, let's say, y plus. Let's actually move this into position. So now we're not using an emitter, but you can see we are actually getting a pretty cool effect here. Let's go ahead and add on a random effector, and this one will affect the scale. Let's say uniform scale of up to 0.25, and affect the rotation. Let's just do 360. Copy, copy, copy. So now those are some random rotations in there. In fact, we could even probably put this into a noise, and now those can be animated. I'm going to index them and set them to UV, and then slow down the animation speed. So those are each randomly moving down. In the cloner, we could crank up our count so we can have a lot more of these. And now we can maybe slow down our rate a little bit depending on what we're doing. And there we go. Now we get like a look at this cool stylized like jet of smoke coming out from there. No emitter necessary. With a lot of the stuff with these new fields and everything, it's so quick and intuitive to build little rigs. Cloner smoke rig. So we were just able to whip out this rig really quickly. Zero that out. We'll zero that out. Oh yeah, I forgot. In one of the recent versions of the cinema, it made it so it didn't like zeroing out certain numbers as it was animating. But I'm just going to zero those out so we can actually scoot the entire rig over. Just a little more intuitive to keep in mind. Flame. I'm just going to call it light flame. So we got our smoke rig. We got a light flame. We've got this... I'm going to group that, and let's just call this displacer animation test. We've got a volume rocket. We've got a model rocket. We've got the reference of the spline. And actually, one thing I did want to do, we'll leave that rocket in, but I did want to give people a... I did want to give people the entire logo just in case they want to do something fun or clever with it. So let's go and give this a new name just so we don't do something silly and lose all the work. But let's go ahead and open up that spline again. There we go. Bring that in and delete out that outside UW, delete. And I don't want the text as part of it. Text is something not for this animation. But as far as this overall logo, sure, why not? Select all the points, clean this up a little bit for everybody. 0, 0. There we go. We got our overall rocket. Copy that, close this file, paste it in. It's really tiny, so we'll scale, scale, scale. Why don't we be extra nice and we'll scale this to match everything else. So we will temporarily rotate that negative 45 degrees. Let's scoot this over right there. I'm going to grab the axis. No, I'm not going to grab the axis. I'm going to grab a null, put that in there, and now we get T for scale. And now I can scale that to match pretty closely. Rocket Lasso logo. And we'll put that back down to 0 because that's the natural angle of it. We'll scoot the rocket into position. 0 out its axis just so that is nice and perfect. Try and make everything nice and organized for everybody. Rocket spline, so we got a rig. I'm going to turn those off because we don't need to see them. Volume rocket and the model rocket. So I think all of this is pretty clean. Oh yeah, don't forget to turn off render perfect on the sphere. Typically that is a very good point. Oh yeah, that's a good point on the smoke. Turn off render perfect. so it doesn't try and render perfect spheres if we're doing kind of a low poly thing. Also, I didn't even note this, but you see it's actually feeding through the color as well. So if we were to, we could put in a nice orange color there just based on this fall off, and it's going to fade out to white. It's going to fade out to whatever color the cloner is, so we could make that green. It's going to fade from orange to green, but obviously we don't want that. But yeah, just a fun little something or other. And even these are just kind of popping out of existence, but we go into that linear field if we wanted to. Go into our remapping, go to, say, our contour is actually a curve, and now we could have this curve behave the same way it is pretty much all the way. That's there. We could pull this in a little bit and then curve it all the way in again. So right at the very end, they shrink down to nothing. So they'll just kind of be constantly disappearing into the rest of the tail. So they don't pop out of existence. So yeah, just another fun little detail there. So I guess, is it important to turn on, I'm going to save this for the final and then we're going to wrap this up. Is it important to turn on our volume builder and mesher here? I'm going to leave them off. I'm going to say turn on builder mesher. But yeah, if we're going to see playback animation. So we'll leave those expanded, but then I'll collapse that. I think that's organized. Okay, everything is pretty cleanly named. Everything is organized. Everything's been put into a nice little null here. I'm quite pleased. So we are going to save this. And I think that's going to wrap it up, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for jumping in to this first official episode of Off the Record, or whatever we're going to call it. And everybody who's participating in the Chain Project, this is also provided. We'll be doing this kind of content more often, where it's more of a project I'm driving, but I'm going to be, chatting with the group and everything about the way things are going. And of course, if I didn't make it clear in the beginning, you can be joining in on these live streams if you join me on Patreon at the technician level or above, just so we can do these bonus streams and you'll get to see this. But whenever it's relevant for our audience and whenever it's relevant for is being useful to pull out a little tutorial or something, I want to be able to give that to everybody. But we will be voting this next week on what the official next project is. So this is getting the Chain Project off the ground, but really next week is going to be the beginning of some sort of official project. I don't know, maybe we'll do some photogrammetry, maybe we'll do some crazy dynamics. But I would like to do some sort of final animation on it for sure. So I'll be thinking about it. Yeah, Scott's saying usually put annotation tags, which is a good idea, or a big honkin' text box on the screen. This is raw material. I think it's laid out well enough. I'm going to trust people that they can figure out what they're seeing there. But those are very good points. I could have put things in layers. There's a lot more ways to organize this even more for people, but I think the names are pretty descriptive. So if there are not any more questions, then let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you so much for everybody who is supporting me on Patreon. Obviously, that's why you are in this room here with me. And that should wrap this one up. So, yeah. Goodbye, everybody. I will see you next Wednesday for the regular Rocket Lasso Live. Bye-bye. You can still hear me saying bye.